All right, everybody, welcome back to another edition of Step by Step, the micro budget filmmaker. Doing it through Zoom again because of, quarantine. Don't know when this is going to end, but for this season, we're going to be talking. We're not going to be talking about any specific film in particular. We're just kind of, shoot the shit with this one. Kind of talk about your guys' process as directing and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, kind of thinking maybe we can help the filmmakers by just kind of talking about our approach, because Naim and I, we have similar sensibilities, but at the same time, very different approaches to how we like to prep, how we like to shoot, all that kind of stuff. And I think when you, as a filmmaker starting out, or maybe you're transitioning from short films to wanting to do your first feature, if you know how the process is going to work, that's just a better way to be prepared. So that's kind of what we're hoping to accomplish, I think.
So let's take it back to the beginning, guys.
Back to the beginning. I like it.
When you guys were first starting out as filmmakers, kind of had to think, like, if you guys had to kind of, first let's kind of start off with influences. If you pick like 4 directors for each of you to put on like the Mount Rushmore of filmmaking for you guys personally, who would you pick?
You go first, Naim.
Okay.
Good question.
I have a feeling.
I know there's one in particular.
I know there's one for Naim.
One.
there's you can ask me today, and my answer will change tomorrow. My answer will change the next day.
Yeah.
What is it right now? As of the time we're recording right now.
And we're not talking about greatest director. We're talking about influences, our own personal.
Yes, your own personal influences.
Okay. Obviously, I'm just gonna say it, Tarantino.
Shocker.
Tarantino.
Never would have thought that.
Didn't see that coming.
When I was first getting into filmmaking or being interested in it, I was looking at filmmakers. He was one of them. Robert Rodriguez, and I know Billy can share that with. We share that similarity too, because he was doing stuff that I didn't know that was. Can you do that? Is that possible? It's like, like he was breaking the rules before I knew what the rules were.
Right.
So.
Great. That's a good way to put it.
So it was him, and then I just think Stanley Kubrick.
Nice.
Films are 10 out of 10.
He's in my 4.
They're all different, but they all have his style. They all have his like unique voice in it, and I don't know. It just next one would be okay. Currently, I've been obsessed. David O. Russell. I've been obsessed with him because the way
the man who fought George Clooney.
Yeah,
Three Kings, man. That's an awesome movie.
That is a good movie.
Just that movie, and then like The Fighter, Silver Linings Playbook,
I forgot he was a fighter. That's right.
The way he approaches them, the way he tells them, it's not about the story. It's about the characters. So the characters do whatever. And also
he does movies that I forget he's done.
Right?
That's a compliment. I don't mean that in a bad way. So yeah,
no.
That's a good one.
How many are in Mount Rushmore? 4, 5? Is there
4. Yeah, you have 4.
Yeah, you had the 4.
I have 4. There we go.
There you go. And that's just like we said. That's just right now.
Right.
Just now. It could change tomorrow.
Yes.
There's
a list. You, Billy?
Well, you get influences from different things. Like I've always categorized my directors as like kind of like I do my baseball players. It's kind of like, well, you have the ones from the old days, like before the technology really evolved.
I didn't mention anybody back then either. Yeah. So this is all.
So I think everybody will, almost every director says something about Hitchcock. So, I think that's just kind of a given. So he's on the Mount Rushmore for sure. the earliest influence for me was David Fincher. Because
Fincher, of course.
Seven is the movie that got me interested in filmmaking, because when that came out, I had just kind of got into acting, and I was studying theater at Northern Kentucky University, and I watched that movie and I was like, I didn't know very much about filmmaking at all, and I watched that and I was just like, how did he make it look like that and feel like that? And I watched it over and over, and then when the Blu-ray, DVD, all that stuff come out with all the extras, they did a really good documentary, and they did a commentary with like Darius Kanji, the DP, Andrew Kevin Walker, the screenwriter, Fincher and Brad Pitt did a commentary, Morgan Freeman. So I listened to all that, and I listened to it multiple times. Like, just, it was like my film school. It was like my film theory. So I just studied that. So that's the first film that really got me interested. And then Memento is kind of the one that put me over the top, where I was just like, that's what I want to do right there. So Fincher and Nolan were huge influences on me very early on. Of course, Robert Rodriguez, because I love Desperado. I love his early stuff, like Desperado, The Faculty.
Dusk Till Dawn.
Right? Dusk Till Dawn.
From Dusk Till Dawn all day for me.
And I'm a huge George Clooney fan, because George Clooney's I went to the same college as he did. So
that's right. He went to
NKU.
Kentucky University, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously huge Robert Rodriguez fan, and The Faculty is one that not a lot of people talk about, because what's his name? Kevin Williamson.
Nice.
The guy that created Dawson's Creek and wrote Scream. He wrote The Faculty, and then Robert Rodriguez came in and directed it. So that was one that kind of gets forgotten, but there's a lot of really actors.
Last summer he also wrote as well.
What's that?
I Know What You Did Last Summer. He also
wrote that. So he was on a tear for a while. But so those are probably Fincher, Nolan, Rodriguez, and Michael Mann. Michael Mann's my other one.
Michael Mann, yes.
He is.
I feel like Michael Mann. You know, it's funny. I feel like Michael Mann is kind of sometimes left out of the conversation a little bit. Sometimes
he's not prolific in the amount of movies that he makes, but every movie is good, and some even the ones that aren't maybe his best are better than most people's best. Like, he's just that good. Like, even that Chris Hemsworth movie from a couple years ago that didn't do very good was still.
Oh yeah, right.
Did you hear the news about Michael?
What was the name? What was the name of that? What was the name of that again?
I have to look it up. I can't remember the name of it. Did
Black
you guys
Hat, guys?
Black Hat.
Black Hat. Okay.
It was still pretty good. I mean, it's not Heat or those, but Michael Mann did release, he's writing a novel as a prequel to Heat that he now wants to turn into a movie. So it's like the beginning of the De Niro, Pacino characters. It's like when they're in their beginning of their careers. So I'm like, Michael Mann can make. He's one of those filmmakers. Like, and then when Robert Rodriguez was doing that series, The Director's Chair, where he interviewed the directors, and he was interviewing Michael Mann. I'm like,
right.
The two of my guys on my list are interviewing each other. I was just like, talk about nerd.
That's right. Yeah.
I was just loved it.
I forgot about Scorsese added to that list too.
Yeah, we can keep going. I mean, another movie that Orson Welles' Touch of Evil was a huge influence on me.
I've said it once and I say it again. I like it more than Citizen Kane.
I do too.
Yes,
We're probably the exception, but whatever. I tend not to.
Yeah, because nobody ever, because everybody's always Citizen Kane, and yeah, of course. But I just always prefer. Touch of Evil.
Michael Mann, though, the reason he's on my list, he's the one that got me really interested in the action crime thriller genre.
Right.
I mean, there's no better of that than he. And so, when I was growing up, my mom was a big reader of novels. She loved to read. I mean, she constantly had books on the coffee tables and just constantly reading. She probably read a novel a week. Like, it was nuts. But she always loved thrillers. It was always something suspenseful, made you think, twist endings, crime, forensic, all that stuff. So growing up, seeing her read that and talk about the stories, we'd watch documentaries together and the crime shows together and stuff. When Heat came out, it was just an easy Heat and Seven came out in the same year too, so it was just like
95.
95, yeah. So
year I was born.
oh man, now you make me feel old. This year I graduated. Killing me. So
95 was a great year for film.
It was.
About
95 and 99.
95, yeah.
Yeah.
94 and 95. There we go. Yeah.
So yeah, so those are that's
90s in general.
Yes.
Yeah. Richard Linklater, Steven Soderbergh.
Oh, Soderbergh. The list could keep. Soderbergh's another one.
Sam Raimi on the list.
Sam Raimi. Love Sam Raimi. Yeah.
Yep.
He made one of my favorite baseball movies, For the Love of the Game.
Ooh, yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And you don't like Sam Raimi directed that. You don't really think about it, but he's a huge baseball fan. So I could never direct a baseball movie. It would be massively expensive.
I was gonna say. I think you'd be.
I would be, because every time I watch a sports movie and they don't do something right with the sports, I lose my mind. Like they don't. That's not how it works. Like because I'm just as big of a sports fan as I am movie fan, and when they don't do it right, it just irks me. You know, when they do it right, I'm like, yes. So, but it's probably no different than like.
What's one of the ones for you that actually does it right?
For Love of the Game is really close.
For Love of the Game?
It's really close. I'll tell you another one that is surprisingly close is Mr. Baseball with Tom Selleck. That's really close, but he was a legit baseball player. Like he and Kevin Costner both legit baseball players.
I didn't know that.
So they get it.
Kevin Costner loves his baseball movies.
Well, but he actually played college baseball. Like he was a legit, like he was a switch hitter, the whole thing. So Bull Durham looks
Field
really,
of Dreams.
really real. Yeah. So that's why he's so good at that. But they're the ones that get it right. Like the football stuff, like football's is kind of the same way. Like Friday Night Lights TV show, they nail it. I mean, they nail it so well. And then Peter Berg created the show. He also directed the movie version, and he's a huge football fan. And of course, they shot it in Austin. That's a huge football area and all that stuff. But they get it right. So you get like a movie like Varsity Blues, which I love it, but the football stuff, yeah, it's pretty.
Doesn't get it right.
I'm like, oh no, they wouldn't do it. That's not how it works.
Does it take you out of it a little bit? Like, man,
that movie's so fun that you and the movie doesn't take itself seriously, so you can kind of let it go because it is.
You kind of forgive it.
So you can forgive it, and it's not like crazy. Like they did a good job with the playing aspect because they brought in real players for the action stuff. But some of the rules, like the way like the coach walks off the field and the players coach a team, like that would never happen in real life. So that was all very, movie-ish, dramatic, and all that kind of stuff, So, but it's still so fun that you can kind of let it go because the characters are so well done and all that kind of stuff. So, anyway, I'm on my sports soapbox, so I'll stop. But those are my Mount Rushmores. Nick, what about you? Who's your four?
The 4 Mount Rushmore for me, and I think I posted about this a number of weeks back. The 4 for me personally, are Spielberg, Scorsese, Kubrick, and Hitchcock. And if I was going to put a fifth one, there because I enjoy his work so much, Edgar Wright.
Oh, wow, Edgar Wright.
Yeah, Edgar Wright's one of my favorites of all time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good list, man. I can't argue with it.
And if it was a 6th, I would put Spike Jonze, but that's a whole different.
I just watched the Beastie Boys documentary on Apple.
You
TV.
have Apple TV? I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. It was. I'm not a huge Beastie Boys fan, but it was a fun documentary, and Spike Jonze did the documentary for him because I know he did.
Well, Spike Jonze directed so many of their videos back in the day.
But they look like they're just a fun group of dudes.
Yeah. I haven't seen it yet because I don't have Apple. I don't have Apple.
We get it free because my wife works part-time at Apple, so we get it free. So it's awesome.
Oh, okay.
The Chris Evans show, Defending Henry, phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Really, really good. So we watched Servant, the M. Night Shyamalan show.
Oh, right.
How'd that go?
It's a little weird.
Okay.
Some really cool moments, but it
seems to be.
Like, I don't know, man. I don't know. Stick to movies. That's just my thing.
Well, it seems to be. Well, I mean, It seems M. Night Shyamalan recently. I mean, I actually think recently M. Night Shyamalan has kind of started to like really like come back a little bit.
Yeah.
For a while, he was kind of like there was like a middle period where it was kind of like he was kind of not.
He's another one that I would put like as my if I was making like a substitute list. Like early on, like The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable.
Unbreakable.
Those two movies, I'm just like out of the gate, nailed it. I really enjoy Signs. I think Signs is really good.
I actually think The Village is underrated.
The Village, I have not gone back to watch it, and I have heard most people say if you go back to watch it, it's better now than it was then because it's not even in the same category as like The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable.
Oh, it's not. It's not for sure. But
if you watch it on its own, it's not. But for me, it was the execution. Like one of the things that bugged me about it, and this is just a personal thing.
The execution of the twist.
No, it's how they talk. Like,
oh yeah.
How do we know that they talk like that in the 1800s? Why did they talk in such a different pattern? Like it seemed weird to me. Like it seemed kind of off. Like it took me out of it a little bit. And I don't know if it was a stylistic thing or if he was just trying to separate it so much from modern day. Like I get all that. I thought the twist was really freaking cool. I just thought the movie was not executed.
I did too. Yeah.
Like I'm like, that's such a great idea that's just not really well executed. So, but The Happening is by far my least favorite.
Yeah.
When Mark Wahlberg is getting chased by the wind, I'm out. Like I can't. Like I don't see anything chasing him, but he's running. Like I don't know what's happening right now.
I always love that line.
That movie. The kills are insane in that movie, though.
What's that?
Those are some of the kills you'll see in that movie. You watch the movie and it's whatever, but the kills. I mean, a guy running into like the lawnmower coming over the guy. I was like,
right, lawnmower scene.
Like, there's kills, and I was like, damn, they're brutal.
Yeah.
So kind of like it was pretty wild in that aspect.
I just love the line. I just love the line where Mark Wahlberg's like, "Come on, guys, take an interest in science."
Yeah. But Shyamalan's so good at sort of setting the scene and just the way his camera moves, and he's got his own style. So I love his style. But when he came back with,
I thought Split was really good.
Split, my bad. I was thinking, Split was awesome. I loved it.
Yeah, Split was great.
That was by far his best movie. I've not seen the one he did before that. The what was it? The Invited or
The Visit?
The Visit.
The Visit.
Was that good? I have not seen that.
I love that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, I loved it.
So
I thought it was great.
Yeah.
But what he does now is when he did The Visit, he actually funded that himself. So he sort of did it semi.
That's right. Yeah.
Independent, and then took it to like his distributors or whatever, and then did the same thing with Split. And Split made so much money that he's now able to do that. Keep continuing that process. He's got a new one that he just casted.
Back in the circles now.
Yeah. And I think so. He just has his own kind of niche now, and I think he's kind of fine. Like he started off so high, and then just plummeted, and now he's kind of found his footing. You know what I mean? Like he's, so I'm a fan. I think he got a little arrogant for a while. Like the
Last Airbender was just.
Oh
God, that was
awful. Yeah, I'm with you. So
all right. What was the other one he did? What was the one he did with Will Smith?
After Earth.
After Earth. Yeah, that was.
Those two were just.
That wasn't good either.
Bother. I didn't even bother.
I tried watching After Earth. I did. I really did.
You gave it an effort.
I tried. I tried it.
I tried. I don't know what to tell you. Like,
I tried it.
Very few movies. I can count them on my hand where I'm like, I can't get through them. I can't. I try. I really do. And even the bad ones, I get through them. But if they're like to a point where I'm like,
I got to turn this off.
I can't get through it because I can't learn anything from this. Oh, you can. Don't make movies like that.
Don't make movies like this. Yeah, exactly.
I think I think maybe he learned from that, and that's when he started to kind of.
Right. So I have a question.
I think it was after that he did.
Yes.
Right before we start recording, you were talking about kind of how you like to write your scripts. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about that? Because I found that pretty interesting.
Well, I'll talk about the current one. The current one that I'm writing, the way I'm approaching it is I have the story in my head, the basic idea of it. And I usually don't do outlines. Once I have a basic story in my head, I'll just go ahead and start writing it. and just go with the flow. But for this one, I wanted to do like a little outline of, you know, scenes, where we're going with it, you know, certain things, because I want to be able to get through it a little bit more quickly than my previous scripts, because I like to take my time, but like really just discover things, not really pre-write them or like come up with ideas beforehand. I like to come up with ideas as I'm writing them and have them organically come out. But this one, I wanted to know where I was headed, but I don't have a specific ending. I have 3 different endings, and I'm experimenting with just writing the piece and then seeing where the story goes, and that will tell me what ending I go with or what ending is necessary, or even none of the endings. Maybe none of them work, and so I might come up with a new ending. But that's just, for me, that's just, I have to start, you know, writing it to get to figure out certain answers that I have questions to. Like, I don't know if that makes any sense, where I don't like to pre-plan a lot of the story, because for me, it's always going to change. So like maybe a scene will change, a character thing or something will change, and I don't want to have to change everything else to that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I like to go in and write and then go about it as I'm writing, so I don't have to, you know, pre-plan the story. I can just follow it organically and where the characters are going. But usually I have it in my head of where I want them to go. But if they don't go that way, that's fine with me. But I'll just have to figure that out as I'm writing and, you know, take a little breather. If I can't come up with something, I'll go and do something else and I'll come back. That really helps. For me to come up with, if I'm really stuck on something, I take a drive. I go for a drive. I don't go on the highway. I go and take the back roads, look at the scenery, and just have like, I have a playlist on Spotify that's just music. And so I'll just listen to music and just be in the zone, just in my own world, just driving. Because I don't know why I get my best ideas in the car as I'm driving.
Interesting.
I don't know. It's weird.
Now, do you find with taking that approach that you have to do a lot of rewrites of your script?
I usually do about 2, maybe 3 drafts.
Okay.
I like to get everything out on paper first, like everybody else, just to get it all out there. And then if I want to change anything, I'll change it. Like for Dilemma, I wrote it all. I have like a first draft. And now I know where I want to go and what I want to do. So the second draft will just be easier to write, because I'll just have to add scenes, take away scenes, add dialogue, take away dialogue, delete some characters, whatever.
Right.
You know. But the previous scripts that I've written, like feature scripts, usually I've written them with no outline. But I wouldn't call no outline. I have ideas written in my notebook. So I'll have my notebook next to me, and I'll have ideas or scene suggestions or character stuff or whatever. Not really a full out outline, but just little ideas. It's not really, they're not in order. They're all over the place a little bit because I'm all over the place.
Yeah.
But it's like a visual guide for me to see it from my head onto the paper, and it just empties my brain out to get more in there. You know what I mean? It's when I have all that, writing it down and then making way for newer ideas, so I can forget about those ideas because I have them written down, and then come up with more stuff for the story.
That's fascinating because I take a completely different approach, and it's so interesting how it doesn't really matter how you do it. It only matters what works for you. You know what I mean? I'm an in-depth outliner. I will spend a ton of time outlining because I early on when I first started writing, I kind of did what you were talking about, where I would just kind of start writing, and then I would just jot down ideas like, ooh, this next scene could have this, or I just have this visual in my head and I jot it down. I'm like, I don't know where I'm going to use that yet, but I want to use that. And I'll still do that to a certain degree. Like if an idea pops in my head or something, I'll jot it down and and include it. But I sit down, I break mine down really, really specifically, because when I would start writing early on, what I always found was I always had a pretty good beginning and a pretty good end, but I always struggled with the middle of my scripts. And then I read Christopher Vogler's The Hero's Journey.
Mm-hmm.
And this was probably 15 years ago. And when I read that, I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense to me. And it just gave you sort of a structure. And that's what I needed.
Yeah.
And so I started using, and he even tells you in the book, like, don't follow this word for word. He's like, find your own way through it. And I did, and I kind of would change this or that, or, you know, and I'll mix it up depending on the story. But for the most part, I really use that to kind of help me with the structure of the story. And when I started doing that, I found outlining in depth really helped me, because I could really think through the areas of the story that I was struggling with. Like, you know, I need something at the midpoint of the movie that really changes the story direction or really does something for the character. And before that, I wouldn't have that. And once I found that, that kind of helped me with like the center of the story and the middle part of the movie. And I almost always figure out my ending first. And then I figure out how I want the very opening of the movie. And then I start to kind of piece it all together. And then as I've developed, I kind of came up with like what I call like a 20-point system. And I'm like, most scripts you want to round roughly 100 pages. What do they say? 90 to 120. And it varies, because if there's more action, that means it could end up being longer. If there's more dialogue, it could end up being shorter, you know, so it just kind of depends. But for the most part, the 1 page to 1 minute rule is pretty effective. And so I came up with a 20-point system, basically, where so it's 20 plot points throughout the movie, and each plot point will equal like a 5-page sequence. And I'll just do something really simple, like a 1 or 2 sentence description of what happens in that sequence. And then that kind of lets me fill in all the gaps. And then I'll go back through that and I'll revise that until I'm happy with it. Then I go back a second time and I come up with a beginning, middle, and end to each of those 20 plot points. So then I almost write like a full-blown paragraph, short story kind of a feel to it. And that lets me kind of really think through all those details. At the same time, I do a lot of backstory with the characters, like, well, what led them to this and who are they and those kind of things. So like Guilt, I did a really in-depth backstory, which obviously plays into the main plot. So I probably wrote a 3 or 4 page short story just on the backstory, and then wrote like maybe a half a page to a page about each of the main 5 or 6 characters. And that really just, and a lot of it's just like, you know, free writing, where you're just like, who's this person? Bam, 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 bam. You just start writing it. So that's kind of where, so when I'm doing the outline, it allows me to be kind of a free writer, where you're just spitballing ideas to yourself. And it'd be really cool if this character had this element or this character, you know, but it allows me to kind of figure out how's everybody connected. What element does the backstory play into the main plot? Like all those, it lets me kind of organize all those. I need to organize my thoughts, because if I'm not,
do you find writing characters? Do you find writing characters and having that backstory helps you facilitate what the story is going to be, or help you write?
Because it allows me to tie in smaller elements. Like it's kind of little details. Like, for example, in Guilt, which we're getting ready to shoot in August. You guys have read it, so you know this, but she's diagnosed with schizophrenia. So she does, like when she wakes up, she has these really intense dreams. And when she wakes up from the dreams, she'll do this sort of OCD pattern that she's created for herself, or she has these needles in this little tray and she pokes her finger to kind of see if she bleeds, to make sure that she's awake. And then she goes through this thing where she does a thing with her light and her robe and her doorknob and all these little things. And I came up with that as I was writing her backstory. And I was literally just like free writing about her character. And I was like, oh, she uses OCD to compensate for the schizophrenia, and it's her way to feel real. So that was just a little element. And then I was able to tie that into the story. Well, that ended up tying into the end of the movie. So it was like little things like that. And then writing the backstory allowed me to bring in the whole grandfather element. So there's all these little things that played into it. So I really find that it helps me come up with like little details, but it also really helps me. It just helps me organize my thoughts. That's really, or organize my ideas. That's really what it comes down to. Because I can be all over the place with ideas. Like I can be like, ooh, this sounds cool, or this sounds cool, but I don't know where to put it.
Yeah.
So when I organize in an outline and I can kind of fit it, I also found that when I'm outlining, I can revise that a lot, and it's much easier to revise a 5-page short story than it is a 100-page script. Yeah. So then, like for Guilt, so I spent almost a year, kind of off and on, working on the story and the characters and the backstory and stuff. I sat down and started writing it mid-February, and I had the whole script written in like 3 weeks. And then that was my first draft. And then I've gone back. I haven't really done multiple drafts of it, but I've gone back and just revised small things. Like at one point there was kind of a romantic subplot between the two lead characters. I've kind of taken that out based off the feedback that I've gotten from people that have read it. And just made small tweaks to scenes, but I didn't have to do a full-blown
hints of it, right? There's hints.
Yeah. So I made tweaks to it here or there, but not a full. I did not need to do a full-blown revision of it. Like it came out, but it's sort of misleading because it's not like all that time I spent on the outline were the multiple revisions. Like I revised my outline 6-7 times before I ever wrote the script. And so I found that saved me time on the back end. Kind of like, it's kind of the way I kind of, the analogy I kind of use is kind of like when you're prepping your movie to direct it. If you put time into pre-production and really prep and know exactly how you want to shoot things and exactly how you want it to look, all these things, it makes, when you go to shoot, it makes that much more efficient. So I kind of do that too. So my outline is sort of my pre-production, and then that way when I go to write the script, it's just more efficient. That works for me. You know what I mean? So the way I look at it is, if you're somebody who can kind of organize your thoughts as you go, then I think your approach works great. If you're somebody you need to have everything kind of organized before you start, then the outlining is a good way to go. So I think both work. It just depends on your preference.
Yeah, I agree.
One question I actually wanted to ask you guys is, because the both of you guys have directed scripts, both that you have written and then you're directing other people's scripts. And I think that I think we talked about this before, but there was an interview with David Gordon Green, because he's done both, because he's directed both his own scripts and other people's scripts, and he kind of talks about how he finds that he can be more playful with it when it's another person's script, because if it's his own script, it's like too much in his head. Do you guys feel similarly, or I was just wondering if you guys could talk about that a little bit?
Billy?
I think that's funny that he said it that way, because that's very true. So I've directed, 6 features. 3 I wrote, 3 somebody else wrote. And early on, when I would direct my own script, anybody that's written a script knows, like you kind of slave over the words that are on there, and like the words you choose, like I described the scene so specifically, like you get really intense about it. Then when you go to shoot it and you're like, that's not going to work, I have to change something, there's a bit of a freak out moment, right? When you're doing that early on. So then when I went to direct someone else's script, I wasn't married to the words on the page. So it was all about what works best on screen. And the biggest one I had that effect on was when I did Devil's Point, because that was my 4th feature. That was the second time I had directed someone else's script. And I felt that I was much more objective in that movie to decide what works better on screen versus what worked on the page. And that movie sort of defined that for me. So from that point on, I forced myself to take that approach on my own scripts. So now, whether I write it or don't write it, it's much easier for me to let go what's on the page and go, let's do it this way. This is what's working on the screen right now. So that's what's working for the actors, or that's what's working for the blocking, or that's what's working for the cinematography, whatever it is. And then I do that all over again when I'm editing. Like, you move shots around, and you just find what works. So when I learned how to be more objective, that really made me a better director, I think. So now I can kind of take that approach no matter who wrote it at this point. So that's how it evolved for me. What about you, Naim?
For me, with my short films, really, I write my own short films. There's been a couple of them that I haven't written. But for me, when I'm writing them, the actors I work with, I hire them, or I want them to be there because they can bring something to the characters or to the story. Right. And if they have their own ideas, I'm very much open to them putting their own ideas into the short films. Some shorts, you know, some character dialogue changes, or maybe there's a different scene that we last minute add or take away or whatever. And it's all in purpose, you know, for the story. You know, it's all how can we tell the best story possible. So when I'm writing the script, I like a short film, for example, I know that maybe some of this is not going to work, or maybe it will. But that's as long as the story's there, and we can work with that after the fact. And this is like second draft, third draft, whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's just you're just discovering it, you know, on set too. You know, you write it, and then it's a whole other thing on set when you're there, and you know, your actors say it and everything like that, and it's just like, okay, this is not going to work. Let's do something different here, and this is not going to work. Let's do something here, or this works, but let's add this to that. You know, it's just a give and take sort of thing, and you're just learning, you know, on set. You know, each time with a different script. Feature-wise, for my first feature, Darkest Edge, I didn't write it. It was written by Joe Gribble, great script. I had to figure out, okay, what can I bring to this story? What can I identify with for me to have, like, to put my hooks in it and to be able to, you know, tell it. And the aspect of him with his family, you know, dealing with that, dealing with his sister, dealing with his, you know, his job and stuff like that. I like those emotional bits, and I can find something that I can bring to that. And when we're on set, some of the dialogue, you know, with the actors change, you know, some of it didn't work, you know, so me and the actors would be on set and we'd be like, you know, we change it on the spot right before we shoot the scene. You know, we do the scene and we're like, okay, after the take is done, we were like, we weren't feeling it, you know, the right, or something wasn't right. We're like, well, okay, well, let's figure out something here. And so it's either me saying, okay, take out that line, or take out this word, use this word, or whatever, or it's me telling them, hey guys, I don't know how I feel about this. How do you guys feel about this? And they'll feel the same way. And then they'll go off and they'll add their own thing to it without me knowing, or they'll put me in the loop, but they tell me what they're going to do. They don't give me specific words, but when they do the take, I'm like, oh, this is great. It's good. Okay. We're on the same page. And so I trusted my actors a lot. Right. On stage with that, because I mean, that's what they're there for. They're collaborators, you know.
Yeah, they're the ones that have to say it. So if they're not comfortable with it, you got to change it.
Exactly. And if I'm not feeling it, it's like, okay, we're in a mutual thing here. Okay, let's figure out something here. And, you know, with Chris, you know, the main character, Chris's character, Mark, who's the main character, there was a couple times where we're like, he comes up to me and he's like, I don't know, this is going to work with this going on here. And he would just, you know, bring in his own thing to it. I was like, you're right. Let's change it up. Let's do this. Let's change the words here. Maybe she'll say this line, I'll say this line, or whatever. And so they'll come up with things in their own way. So I'm not, and I think that would approach would work for me if I even wrote my own script, because you never know how it's going to be, you know, said, or how it's going to be on, you know, on the day, unless you're on the day doing the scene, you know, unless you have a table read and you figure out, okay, from the table read, this is what's going to sound like. Okay, you can make adjustments from the table read, but some people don't have the luxury of doing a table read.
Right.
So, you know,
table read,
you can have that read, but, you know,
yeah.
But it's basically just trusting your actors and trusting, you know, like, we're doing, they want the best story possible. They don't want themselves to look bad either. So everybody's in conjunction, for the story. And, if it works for the story, it works for the story. If it doesn't work, we gotta figure out that problem. So yeah, it's to add to David Gordon Green. Yes, you can play a lot with it when it's not your words. And I think you can also play with it when it's not your script, when it's your script, but to a certain degree, I think some people have scenes that they really want and they're going to film them anyway, or, and then it doesn't work. They find out later during the editing process, okay, that didn't work. And they learn that for the next one.
I think a lot of directors early on have this feeling like if they don't stick to the script, they're not being true to their vision. And that's not accurate. And
Yeah.
you have a vision for the film, but the vision is not necessarily the words on the page. The vision is the tone, the style, the performances, the characters, all of those elements tie into the vision. So if you're confident in your vision of the movie and what you want it to look like, feel like, sound like, those things, the words on the page really aren't as important. And it really is the blueprint, the script is your blueprint for building the movie. And you really have to use it that way. So if an actor comes to you, and this goes back to, like, people will say, well, how do you direct actors? It's not that complicated. You just communicate and you listen. And
it's all communication.
I'm sorry?
It's all communication.
All communication. Totally agree. So if an actor comes to you and they're like, this line isn't working for me, a lot of directors' reactions early on are, no, I need you to say it like this. Well, that means, first of all, you didn't listen to what the actor was saying. That's your first mistake. And then the second mistake is you didn't let your actor do what worked for them. And the real point is, like, as long as they get the context of what you were trying to say or communicate to the audience, as long as they keep that, the same information is being communicated to the audience. And you have to think about it. The movie itself is a communication to your audience. So if the information on the page is communicated to the audience, that's what's important. How that is communicated is going to change a little bit, and that's okay. And I think the other thing you got to realize is every audience member is going to have their own interpretation of what you communicate. So you kind of have to let that go a little bit. There's a control freak element that comes into directors, and I've definitely been guilty of it. So when you know when to let that go and when you need to hold on to it, that just takes time to learn, which is why it's like, do a bunch of shorts before you do a feature. Your first feature, don't spend a lot of money because you're going to fail. It's okay. It's okay to fail. These are all things you're going to learn. And every movie you do, no matter how good it is, you're going to learn from it. So,
exactly.
So that process that we're talking about, it just takes time to develop. You just kind of
consider it like film school, Yeah,
exactly. Sit in a classroom at a university that you're spending, tens of thousands of dollars on is not going to teach you that. It's just not. You got to get out there and you got to do it. That's the best. That's the best film school.
Absolutely.
Got to do it.
These days, the only reason to go to film school, this is a total side note, the only reason to go to film school is the connections within the industry.
Networking,
So
free equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Free equipment. That plays
equipment now, like, you can go make movies with your iPhone. So that's even kind of lost its luster.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you can edit on your MacBook.
I've made shorts on my iPhone. So
yeah.
I mean, Soderbergh's done his last 3 films on his iPhone, I think.
Yeah. So, and granted, now he knows what he's doing, and you can't just point and shoot. But even so, those days, it used to be that's why people went to film school, because they couldn't afford to have access to the stuff. And then you also learned, and then all those things. But the amount of money that you spend on that, like, you would be better off to take a fraction of that and just go make a bunch of shorts and just learn from that. Don't worry. I mean, look at David Sandberg, who's now doing, Shazam and Annabelle. And I mean, he hit the lottery. Somebody saw his short and hired him. That's a lottery ticket. But he developed his style by making short films over and over and over and over. And that's the key. Naim, you've done something similar. I did something similar to that early on, where I made a bunch of short films. And then I did a bunch of commercials that also helped me, because I kind of learned my visual style, like how I like the camera to move, how I like to edit. I did And I did some videography
Yeah.
work like for weddings and things like that. And and all of that plays into how you learn. You know, you learn how to be an efficient shooter and how you like the camera to move and frame, and all those things play into it. And I think people are so worried that they're going to fail. They're so worried about that. It's like, it's not that serious, which is why you don't spend a lot of money at first. Because if you don't spend a lot of money and you fail, what have you lost? Not much, right? So that's where it's at for me.
Do you guys, this is another question I want to ask. Do you guys come up with like a shot list before you go to shoot? Because I remember Tarantino was talking about this before he made Reservoir Dogs. I think he was saying something like because it was for the first film he wanted to do, he wanted to have a shot list so that people kind of knew what he was doing. And then he said by like the first week, he was like, he just started leaving his shot list at home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I did not hear that story. That's interesting.
Yeah. So I was wondering what your guys' process for that was like.
Who wants to go first?
For me, I do a shot list. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a shot list. I go through the script and I'm like, okay, how do I want, obviously the shot list is not permanent. I mean, when you're on set and you're on the day, things can change. So you don't be married to it. It's just showing your DP and, other people that, there is a guide, we're going off of something, it's just, when you're on there and you see the space for the first time, if you haven't seen the space beforehand, that shot list can change depending on the location. Some locations you can't do this shot because, there's a fucking wall right there, or there's like something here that you can't, move.
Mm-hmm.
But I usually have a shot list. I like it better than a storyboard because I feel like storyboards, they're more for sci-fi, more heavy action.
Sure. Yeah.
That type of thing. You got to get visual with it. You really got to know,
There's no point to storyboard a close-up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
For a drama, for a mystery, for whatever. Maybe a horror film you can storyboard, maybe for like certain kills or maybe for certain things that you want, specifically. But usually I just have a shot list of what I want, and I communicate that to my DP if I'm not the DP. And we just go from there and figure it out. And yeah, I have a shot list. Yeah, I think it's very helpful to know, not to go in there completely blind.
Yeah.
You don't want to go into anything. You want to prep a little bit. But really,
I agree with you. I shot list heavily, but it goes back to similar reasons to why I outline. You know what I mean? It's organizing my thoughts. So for me, I'll tell you the other part of a shot listing that really helps me is when you read over a scene, you kind of take the whole scene in together. So you kind of just sort of visualize it naturally. But when you go in and shot list, you're literally breaking down the scene word by word, sentence by sentence, line by line, right? So you start to think about it in little tiny pieces. And that's what the shot list helps me do. And then I'll start to see things in the script that I didn't see before. And I'm like, oh, how am I going to cover that? Or do I want to close up there? Do I want to see that wide? Like, how do I want the audience to see this? So that's what helps me. And then it helps me. And those are things that you're not going to think of if you don't break down the script in that kind of detail. So I think, in my personal opinion, every director should shot list. A lot of people are like, no, you got a storyboard. I think storyboard is highly overrated. Because what happens with storyboarding is you're so married to how the storyboard looks. Kind of comes back to the same thing we were talking about when you're married to what's on the script. And if you're so married to what's on that storyboard and you want it to look just like that, you lose perspective a little bit on what's happening on the set.
I think storyboards make a lot more sense if you're doing, like Naim was saying, if you're doing a story that's like heavy on its visuals.
If you're doing a visual effects sequence that
if you're doing a
prevised and those kind of things with a visual effects artist and stuff, yes, that's where it's important. But for the most part, unless you're doing that, you really don't need, and
like I can imagine,
or maybe it's only a couple of shots. You're like, well, I kind of need it like this, and then you kind of draw. And I'm a terrible drawer, so I can't. But then you use it for that. But for the most part, the shot list will really decide. The other thing that I do that really helps me be efficient on set, this is a personal thing that I do, hope maybe it helps somebody, but what I also know is that, like, I'm going to use this close-up, but let's say it's a 3-page scene. This close-up is only going to cover the dialogue for page 1. I'm going to cover page 2 and 3 with a different shot. So then when I go to shoot, when I'm doing that close-up, I'll communicate to the DP and the actors, look, we're only covering the scene from this point to this point. And then I'm going to cut. And so instead of so let's say you do 4 to 5 takes of that close-up, right? Well, if you're doing 4 to 5 takes of that close-up and you're only doing 1 page versus 3 pages, you're going to get through those takes a lot quicker, right? Because now that's less dialogue for the actor to have to perform. If they forget a line, if they screw it up, you got to do another take. If there's all those things play into it. So you save yourself time on set as well. Part of that also goes into the editing. You kind of already know how you're going to edit it. So I just don't need all this extra stuff. I only need this coverage. And I do that for every single shot. So I'll write in my shot list. My shot lists are really, really descriptive. And I'll say, close up on this character from this point of view. And then after that, I'll write starts at this point of the scene and ends at this point of the scene. What that helps me do is I'm not going to remember that by the time I get to set. So when I look at my shot list and go, okay, I only need to cover this shot, only needs to cover this part of the scene. Next shot only needs to cover this part of the scene. And it allows me to take the whole scene and break it down into really small pieces. So then because I have that organized on my shot list, I'm able to then communicate that really clearly to the crew and the cast on set. And then that saves them time. So then we'll kind of rehearse the whole scene and kind of get a feel for the whole scene. Then I'll go back and okay, we're going to do this close up or this wide shot, but we're only covering you walking into the room. Just need to get you walking in. And then we're done. We're going to move on to something else. And the actors and the crew love that because then that saves them energy. Because then they're not standing around going, why are we shooting the whole scene from this? There's no way we're going to use all of this. You know what I mean? Unless you're doing a wide shot that you're going to cut back to multiple times throughout a scene. Why are you doing that? So it helps me organize all those thoughts as well as break down the script in really little pieces. And I think all of those things kind of help you see the movie differently and then also help you prep yourself really well for when you're on set. And that's how I'm able to go in and go. Because I do that, I can then go to the crew and go, okay, we're going to start shooting at 9. We're probably going to be wrapped by 4. And then we end up wrapping at like 3:15. Almost always on my sets, we wrap earlier than I tell them to. For me, it's a philosophy of undersell, over deliver. And if you tell them, so there's a cool little story. So this will kind of give you an analogy of my approach, but me and my analogies. But there's this married couple, and the husband's taking a new job, and the end result is exactly the same, but he sets it up in 2 different ways to his wife. So the wife's really nervous about how much he's going to be gone. So in the first scenario, he tells her, "Oh, don't worry, honey, I'll be home every night for dinner with this new job." But he only ends up being home 3 nights a week. So she's pissed off that he's not home every night because that's what he said he was going to do. Mm-hmm. Second scenario, he tells her, "I'm going to be really busy. I'm probably only going to be home 1 night a week." But then he ends up being home 3 nights a week. Same end result. But now she's happy. She's like, "Oh, you're home so many more nights than you said you were going to be." It's all about how you set it up, right? So when I go to my cast and crew and I tell them we're going to wrap at 6, and I know for a fact we're not going to wrap that late unless some catastrophe hits. But then I'm covered, because if a catastrophe hits and we still wrap at 6, I look good. But if I tell them we're going to wrap at 6, nothing goes wrong, and we wrap at 4, I look like a fucking genius. And they're like, "Oh wow, we wrapped really early today. We did great." And it's only because now if I'd have told him, "Oh no, we're going to be early. We're going to wrap at 3, and then we wrap at 4," then I look like an idiot. Well, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's not planned well. And it's all about the expectations that you set for people. So
exactly.
The only way I'm able to be that accurate is because I shot listed so in detail. So there's a carryover effect to that.